The voice came low, wrenched from somewhere deep. "Little brother, you must help me." Nero's shanks locked eyes with Kael, grip desperate as a drowning man's. "If anyone asks, you never saw me, not a single word. My entire life's happiness rests in your hands." Before the words faded, his figure dissolved into a blur of motion. A sharp gust scraped past Kael's brow, and then he was gone, vanishing into the forest's depths without stirring a single leaf. Kael's brow twitched. A single thought passed. Lunatic, young master, who was that? Didn't he want our spirit herb? Folly peeked out from behind him, dark eyes swimming with confusion. Ignore him. Kael shoved the herb into his robes, hoisted Folly onto his back, and launched himself the opposite way. Dry twigs snapped and exploded beneath his feet. His speed erupted to its limit in an instant. 2 hours passed before Kael halted in a mountain hollow. He allowed himself 3 breaths of respite. A roar detonated from the woods. Towering ancient trees toppled like felled giants. A creature burst forth, 2 zhang long, built like a wild boar, but bristling with 3 rows of bone spikes along its spine. A 4th-tier demon beast. Kael's pupils sliced to pinpricks. His palm found the sword hilt. "Young master, I'll handle it." Folly clutched his clothes tighter. "No, stay." Kael's command broke off. The beast never even glanced their way. It charged past, 10 zhang distant. In that instant of its flank crossing his vision, Kael saw the terror drowning its bronze, bell eyes abyssal, primal. A sharp whistle shrieked from the sky. A purple, gold hammer, 2 feet wide, sheathed in howling astral wind, smashed into the beast's spine. The earth bucked a ring-shaped shockwave erupted, dust blotting the heavens. When it settled, a crater yawned, several zhang across. The demon beast was pulp of bone and flesh. The ground shuddered. A figure strode forward, so imposingly burly the air choked. A mere beckoning wave, and the purple, gold hammer hummed back into a massive palm. 3 strides closed the gap. The figure loomed over Kael, imperious, 9 kai tall, shoulders broad as a mountain, waist thick as an oak. Iron hard muscle surged beneath azure robes. And set atop that monstrous frame was a face, delicate, beautiful, a contrast that stole breath. Brat, seen anyone pass by here. Running especially fast, the warrior woman's voice rumbled like thunder rolling over porcelain. "No." Kael shook his head. She turned her glare onto Folly. No. Folly buried her face in Kael's back, trembling. A snort. The woman hefted the hammer onto her shoulder. "You wait, bastard. When I catch you, I'll flay your hide for certain." Heavy footfalls, each a drumbeat in the earth, faded into the distance. Deep night settled over the abandoned den. A campfire danced, its flames licking at skewered beast meat that sizzled and wept oil. Kael completed his breathing cycle, lungs folding, and slowly opened his eyes. Folly squatted nearby, staring at the roasting meat with rapt fixation. A glistening thread of drool clung to the corner of her mouth. Hungry, Kael reached for the meat. A voice, ill-timed, echoed from the cave mouth. What an incredible aroma. Nero's shanks materialized, his shadow swallowing half the cave. Kael was on his feet, sword bared, in a breath. "It's you," a recognition cooled his stance. "Don't be nervous, no ill intent. I just caught a whiff of..." Nero's shanks' chuckle was sheepish, his eyes locked on the meat. "Koff actually came specially to thank you, little brother." Without ceremony, he tore a beast leg free and gnawed it to bare bone in a few ravenous bites. "That's mine." Folly sprang up, arms spread wide, bearing tiny tiger canines as she shielded the roast. "What's the little girl so stingy for?" Nero's shanks withdrew his hand, his expression awkward, then his gaze cut back to Kael. "Little brother, you're no ordinary figure. That purple crystal vine's toxic haze, you walked through it unscathed, didn't you?" Kael's pulse flickered, but his face betrayed nothing. "She is your junior sister." "Yes." Nero's shanks' face collapsed. "Why is she chasing you?" "She." A mournful sigh. "She wants to marry me." Folly sprayed a mouthful of beast meat. Kael's lips twitched, the ghost of a laugh crushed back. Nero's shanks' face pooled with grievance. "I can't beat her in a fight, so run." 3 years, I've fled. Deep mountains, ancient forests, sleeping beside demon lairs. You think that's easy? Little brother, you judge. Childhood sweethearts, hearts in perfect harmony, but she can't just forcibly take me as her husband. I, Nero's shanks, a man of 7 kai, upright under the heavens and on this earth. How could I ever, wait? Kael's head buzzed. Childhood sweethearts? Hearts in harmony, you. Like her, of course. Light blazed in Nero's shanks' eyes. Liked her from the first glance, and she feels the same. A churn in Kael's chest. Mutual love. She wants you as her husband, and you flee. Why? And Nero's shanks' sigh stretched into a groan of deep anguish. You don't understand. She wants to marry me. Means I join her Murong family as a live-in son-in-law. A true man, born of heaven and earth, ancestral tablets above, his own doorstep below, to be a matrilocal husband. I'd sooner die. Kael was now absolutely certain. This man's malady ate clear to the bone. A muffled explosion, deep and visceral, tore from underground. The entire mountain lurched. Cave walls fractured. Stalactites rained down. Nero's shanks, the voice boomed, steeped in killing intent. You bastard, made me run circles across 300 lie. Get out here. Nero's shanks' face drained white. His form flickered, darting for the exit. Kael scooped Folly up, toes coiling and springing, bursting through a collapsing fissure. Both feet landed on wreckage outside and froze. A pit yawned before him, several zhang wide. At its bottom, Nero's shanks lay flat on his back, the violet, glowing giant hammer pressing down onto his chest. A faint creak whined from his sternum. The warrior woman strode forward like a conquering overlord, 3 steps to the pit's edge. She folded her arms. Her voice was the wind off the far north. Run. Why aren't you running now? 3 years, and the peaks you've crossed outnumber the roads I've walked. Legs failing you today, Yana Murong. Nero's shanks coughed flecks of blood, voice raw. Don't push me. Becoming a live-in son-in-law only over my dead body, Yana Murong said nothing. She looked down at him and suddenly laughed, a sound carrying unspeakable pain. Today, either you return with me, or you lie here forever. Her voice softened, almost fragile. Are you like the rest, thinking that with my face, I'm fated to be unworthy of true affection? Nothing of the sort. Nero's shanks roared. Killing, intent, and desperate justification ricocheted between them. Kael rubbed his brow, ready to slip away with Folly. Brat! The rough voice exploded behind him. Do you also think I'm not good enough for him? Kael turned, tone even. No. Yana Murong's massive hands clenched, knuckles cracking like stones. I want your true heart's words. Those are my true heart's words. Kael's gaze met hers directly. No avoidance, no pity. She froze. That look, a gaze treating her as normal, was something she'd almost never known since childhood, but her swagger and ferocity seemed to have had their bones pulled. You can see, I am very unsightly. Since I was little, everyone has said so. Kael lifted his head, each word deliberate. Does your appearance have anything to do with whether he likes you, or whether you're worthy? You like him, he likes you. That alone means you are worthy. What outsiders think is outsiders' business. Their opinions have never mattered in the slightest. Well said. A bellow came from the pit. Yana Murong fell silent. Her clenched hands trembled, knuckles whitening. For years she'd wrapped self-loathing in ferocity, pestering Nero's shanks to become a matrilocal husband, desperate to prove she deserved to be cherished. Yet this youth's casual words made that old conviction feel like dust. Folly. Kael turned. Did people used to call you stupid? Many people, very many. Do you care? Without hesitation, Folly wrapped both arms around Kael's arm, her voice crisp. I don't care. Because I have young master. And chicken legs, you see. Kael gave Yana Murong a faint smile. Even my family's Folly understands it better than you. Yana Murong stared into the youth's clear, limpid eyes. Then one huge stride forward, and a large hand crashed down on Kael's shoulder. Thump, half his body went violently numb. A mountain-toppling dull agony detonated from his shoulder blade. His feet sank into the soil, clear to the ankles. He truly suspected she meant to exact revenge. Brother Gu, oblivious, she slapped his shoulder again twice for good measure. What you said makes absolute sense. Her grin was rough, but noticeably lighter. Big sister, Folly's eyes reddened. Stop hitting him, young master. Young master is almost as short as me now. Yana Murong glanced down, then hastily plucked Kael from the dirt like a root vegetable. Apologies, Brother Gu. This brute strength in my hands had it since I was small. She rubbed her hands, sheepish. Hearing you speak, I suddenly understood a great many things. Got overwhelmed, couldn't control myself. Kael's face darkened as he rubbed his shoulder. His gaze drifted toward that purple gold hammer. That woman could swat a fourth, tear demon beast dead, and it was not mere brute force. Senior brother, Yana Murong beckoned. The hammer hummed back into her palm. Come out, I won't force you into a live-in marriage anymore. Nero's shanks crawled from the pit, coated in dust, eyes red, rimmed. His lips trembled with emotion. I know you treat me true. Yana Murong turned her face aside. Her voice was gravel over roadbed, yet every word trembled faintly. In the past, I cared too much about their mouths, always thinking I had to make you matrilocal just to shut them from now on. I won't be like that, junior sister. Nero's shanks bounded over, seizing Kael's hand. Brother Gu, this immense kindness Nero's shanks, will remember it for life. His eyes were red, brimming with the regret of meeting too late. Grimacing, Kael extracted his hand. If there's nothing else, Brother Gu, Nero Shanks's gaze fell on them. Where are you two headed? Great Kai Martial Academy. Folly blurted, her little face proud. My young master is the most talented in all Skyblade City. He's going to a Valor Hall. Nero Shanks paused, then broke into a grin, meaningful, deep. Well, a coincidence indeed. His laughter rang out. Still, with Brother Goo's ability, a little Valor Hall won't hold you long. When the time comes, we will meet again. Kael's shoulder blade throbbed as if faintly fracturing. His farewell clasp was perfunctory. He turned to leave, pulling Folly. But heavy footsteps pursued. Yana Murong closed in, stirring a fierce wind. Kael sidestepped, a cold hiss escaping through his teeth. She did not strike. Instead, she extended a pitch-black iron token before his eyes. The token of Murong Yan settled into his palm, solid weight, chilled iron carrying the residual warmth of her hand. Its face bore a deeply recessed character, Mu. Its back held the strokes of wrong, with traces of unsmoothed iron filings between. Origin crystals and pills are crude and vulgar. I disdain to give such things. Keep this token close. In the Great Kai Imperial City, at any shop of my Murong family, this command marks you as honored guest among honored guests. Her tone was domineering, yet a trace of expectation flickered in her eyes. The corner of her lips twitched upward, then she forced it into a displeased line. Calling me Mrs. Distant and too formal, call me elder sister. Kael's mouth corner spasmed. He braced himself, forcing out a low sister Murong, his only desire, leave this place with all speed. Tusk, Nero's Shanks strolled forward, watching Kael's hurried retreat. Not simple at all. What's not simple? This Brother Goo, steadiness of temperament surpasses even us. He's either the reincarnation of a great power, or has endured hardships ordinary people scarcely bear. A rare seedling seen once a century. His tone grew weightier. Let him temper himself in Valor Hall for now. Once the sect opens its mountain gate again, you and I shall go together to bring him back. Yana Murong's eyes flashed sharp light as she nodded emphatically. Beneath an ancient tree towering over Tenjiang, Folly spread dark green medicinal powder onto Kael's shoulder. Her fingertips trembled, the rims of her eyes reddening. Kael toyed idly with the token of Murong Yan. Honored guest, better to toss me a few thousand origin crystals, far more practical. Suddenly, his fingers tightened. The longsword slid soundless into his grasp. He shielded Folly behind him. Footsteps carried on the wind short, erratic, tinged with the stench of blood. A figure staggered through underbrush, robes slashed, blood droplets striking dead leaves from drooping fingers. Chaelan's face was parchment pale. His unfocused eyes sharpened slightly at the sight of Kael. Then he waved a violent hand, voice hoarse and shattered. Run they! He bit down, spun, and plunged into the dense forest, scattering a trail of blood. Where'd he go? Where'd he run? Wounds that heavy, he can't have gone far. Search. The distant shouts were muffled but closing, killing intent drawing tight like an invisible net. A few breaths later, 5 figures burst through tree shadows, coming face to face with Kael, at their head, Song. It's you, cruel amusement, flickered in Song's eyes. What a coincidence, truly. Kael's expression remained indifferent. A figure flew backward out of the deep woods, crashed violently, coughed up great mouthfuls of blood. Chaelan. 3 rogue cultivators stepped out at leisure, converging with Song's group of 5. We've caught him. Remember your promise, one rogue cultivator said, tone cold. Rest assured, payment increased by half. First seize this brat too. Song pointed at Kael. Chaelan lifted his head, a wretched smile squeezing through blood and grime. Little brother, apologies. I helped you, and yet I dragged you in. You have indeed dragged me in. Kael pressed Folly's trembling hand and met Chaelan's eyes, his gaze calm as a bottomless pool. Remember, you owe me a favor. Ha, Song sneered. Can't even save yourself, yet you think of saving others. Move. At that very moment, wait. A rogue cultivator stared at Kael, Adam's apple bobbing, voice dry and taut. Are you Kael? Kael raised an eyebrow. You know me. That rogue cultivator felt his back drench in cold sweat. That day in Wildwood, he had glimpsed from afar that slaughter, God method carved into his very bones. I'm abandoning this mission. His voice was low, but it overpowered all other noise. Amid stunned, uncomprehending stares, he turned and strode away without hesitation, every step absolute finality. Song's face turned iron, blue, he made to roar in fury. Then he saw Kael slightly raise his eyes, no sword intent released, yet the air abruptly congealed. Dead leaves hung suspended in midair, refusing to fall. The remaining rogue cultivators exchanged horrified glances and unanimously retreated half a step. Song's lips quivered, but in the end he dared give no order. He could only watch as Kael took Folly's hand, supported Chaelan, and walked unhurriedly into the depths of the forest, unable even to utter a word of obstruction. Kael hauled Chaelan to his feet, Folly shadowing his heels. They strode unhurried into the forest's depths. Song and the others stood rooted, humiliation and fury sharpening their faces. None dared follow. Only when no probing spiritual sense trailed them did Kael halt beside a rocky outcrop. Chaelan cupped his fists, still unsteady, blood, flecked froth clinging to the corner of his mouth. His voice rasped with raw gratitude. "Little brother, this life, saving grace, Chaelan will not forget it." Kael brushed aside the pleasantries. He drew from his robe a strange orb the size of a fist, crystal, clear with mist churning within, and held it forward. "You've seen more of the world than I have. Tell me what this is." Chaelan accepted it. One glance and astonishment flared in his eyes, a spirit source. Kael's brow furrowed. Spirit source. Chaelan steadied his breath. His tone grew earnest. Cultivators rely on origin crystal pills, but origin crystal is mined from mineral veins, tainted with the earth's impure Kai. Used without restraint, that impurity eventually clogs the meridians. Minor cases slow Kai circulation. Severe ones shatter the very foundation. But a spirit source is a treasure born of pure, concentrated heaven, and spiritual energy. Its Kai is pristine and gentle. It nourishes the meridians, sparing you the agony of refining out contamination. It takes over 1,000 origin crystals to refine a single one. Common rogue cultivators have never even heard of it. Understanding flickered across Kael's eyes. Now he grasped why that overseer had fought to the death for a chunk of raw stone. He asked quietly, "Is it of use to you?" A rueful laugh escaped Chaelan. "A treasure like this, with my meager means, I can't afford to use it lightly," but his gaze drifted to folly. "This little girl already stands on the threshold of Kai sensing. If you use the spirit source to guide Kai into her body, it will double her progress and forge a foundation so pure it will be flawless." Kael nodded and stowed the spirit source away. His own meridians were a natural anomaly, a furnace that incinerated every impurity. This trinket was nearly useless to him. But for folly, it was a perfect fit. Seeing no further questions, Chaelan tactfully clasped his fists and took his leave. His injuries had been stabilized by the medicine Kael gave him, yet he still needed quiet recovery. Kael did not ask him to stay. Folly's illusion-bane eye drew too much attention. One less pair of eyes meant one extra layer of safety. After Chaelan departed, Kael pressed on toward the imperial capital with Folly. For the half-month that followed, only the low growls of savage beasts and the wind threading through the primeval trees of the savage expanse kept them company. Inside a cavern, the campfire had burned to cold ash. Folly sat cross-legged, the spirit source in her palm shed a hazy glow, its mist seeping gently through her tender meridians. Kael guarded the entrance, his divine sense locked onto every surge of spiritual energy within her. Without warning, a corona of spiritual light bloomed around her, like a thin mantle of moonlight draped across her shoulders. Kai condensation, first layer. Kael's brow lifted. When he had breached this step, it consumed 3 full days, and he had been hailed as a once, indicates prodigy in Skyblade City. Folly achieved it in less than half a day. The bloodline of the illusion-bane eye was indeed monstrous. A silent smirk touched his lips. He sealed the cave mouth completely and sat facing inward. The origin crystals piled around him blazed to life. Spiritual energy coalesced into a torrent as fierce as coiling pythons, ramming savagely into his meridians. He had already forced open over 300 branch meridians. Meridian opening 9th layer was a single membrane away. The liquefied Kai within him roared, a river in flood, grinding through the last of his shackles. 1 meridian, 2, 10th meridian opening, 9th layer achieved. Without an instant's pause, he snatched out another fistful of origin crystals and stuffed them, together with 2 spirit herbs, directly into his mouth. The medicinal potency ignited. The spiritual energy boiled, and an even wilder tide surged. At the end of his branch meridians, that nebular mist sharpened into clarity, a membrane thin as a cicada's wing, bulging visibly under the pressure of his Kai. Those were acupoints, 360 hidden gates scattered across the body, shattered the membrane and flood it with Kai. That was acupoint opening. The final branch meridian burst through with a thunderous clap. The liquefied Kai in his meridians fused into a single, seamless whole. An unstoppable, earth-sundering force erupted within him, like a dragon waking beneath the soil. Kael focused his mind to a razor's edge, seized that world, breaking power, and hurled it against the first membrane. A sharp crack tore through his body, like ice shattering underfoot. Spiritual power roared into the acupoint, a collapsing dam. The impact had not yet faded. He rode its momentum, sweeping through the rest. Crack after crack after crack, 7 crisp, splintering sounds merged into a single chain inside him. One after another, acupoints tore open. The liquefied Kai in his meridians thinned a little, diluted by all the diverted flows. Only when the driving force finally exhausted itself did he slowly exhale a mouthful of stale breath. Acupoint opening realm achieved. For an ordinary cultivator breaking through, opening 7 or 8 acupoints was the absolute limit. He had forged the extreme realm, his spiritual power liquefied. Only that gave him such profound reserves. When he opened his eyes, Folly stared at him with her big, dark, glistening eyes. The spirit source in her palm had dimmed by a ring. Layer upon layer of spiritual light stacked on her body, she had already planted herself firmly at Kai condensation, 3rd layer. Warm satisfaction rose in Kael's heart. He was about to speak when a thin stream of dust sifted down from the boulder sealing the cave entrance. His pupils snapped to pinpricks. Something was wrong. In the next heartbeat, dust cascaded in gusts. The entire boulder, the whole rock wall, began to tremble. A low, muffled roar climbed up from the deep earth. Folly's fingers clutched his sleeve, her voice a thread. Young master. Kael blasted the cave mouth open with a palm strike and swept her out. The ground beneath their feet bucked as if a colossal beast trampled it. Trees whipped back and forth. Leaves fell like rain. A howl, brutal and maddened, ripped the sky apart from the deepest heart of the wildwood, surging toward them from afar. The roar carried a terrifying suppressive pressure that hung the air heavy for a long moment. It was a human voice, yet more deranged than any monstrous beast. Kael's heart slammed against his ribs. His face twisted in shock. He flung Folly onto his back and shot forward, an arrow loosed from a bowstring. Before he could even identify the source of that long, tearing howl, a chill spiked from his tailbone to the crown of his skull. If they stayed, they would die without a doubt. The forest behind them erupted into chaos. Countless beast roars tore through the night in a fraction of a breath, enraged, panicked, even laced with cowering submission. This was no hunt, it was a rout. The entire wildwood shuddered, giant trees quaked, leaves fell in torrents. The earth was pounded by a titan's hammer, each impact slamming through the soles of his feet and into his heart. A more explosive roar ripped the air right behind their necks. Kael's gaze sliced to the corner of his eye, and his pupils contracted to slits. An iron, scaled beast over 40 meters long was mowing down the ancient trees. Its dark scales scraped against splintered trunks, unleashing a screech so grating it set teeth on edge, like 100 rusty blades grinding stone at once. Its blood-red giant eyes locked dead onto the fleeing figures ahead. Its tail lashed out idly, and a trunk as thick as a man's waist snapped in half. A short, clipped scream sliced the air. The cultivator at the very rear never had time to struggle. The beast slammed into him, and he burst into a blooming cloud of bloody mist. Crimson splattered across emerald leaves, then was instantly shredded into trailing wisps of red smoke by the gale of their passage. Despair spread like plague. In the span of a few breaths, claws, that massive tail, and those armored scales crushed the party of dozens. The crunch of shattering bone and the abruptly cut-off wails of the dying echoed one after another. By the time only the sound of wind remained in Kael's ears, barely a dozen were left alive, the weakest among them at the 6th layer of acupoint opening. Those who had been too slow were already torn scraps of flesh caught between the irons, scaled beasts' teeth. Everyone wrung the last wisp of spiritual energy from their bodies. Their steps stumbled, faces ashen, yet none dared halt. Only Kael's dantian churned with dense, steady liquid spiritual energy, a deep sea undercurrent with more than half still in reserve. Even so, the wind pressure of his breakneck sprint slammed into him like an iron plate, crushing his breath. The sweat beading on his forehead, torn into icy, missed the moment it seeped. Out, a prickling, swelling ache traced his meridians, as if 1,000 tiny needles scraped the inner walls of his blood vessels, but he didn't dare slow by a fraction. On his back, Folly clutched his collar with desperate knuckles, her small face bleached white by the gale. The dense forest to the right shattered without warning. A round, rotund figure burst from the undergrowth at an angle, a fatty. He looked up and met the iron armor beast's blood, red furnace-sized eyes, a wail squeezed from his throat. "How is there one here too?" His mouth griped, but his feet moved with absurd speed. His bloated form flickered with afterimages, overtaking several people in 3 breaths. His speed fell only a thread behind Kael's, and an expression of easy leisure still clung to his chubby face. He actually had the nerve to strike up a conversation. "This brother—" Kael ran on in silence, not even sweeping a glance his way. The fatty turned to Folly. "Little girl, has anyone ever told you?" "HMPH. Folly twisted her head away. Rebuffed, the fatty drew breath to try again, but a long, absent, bestially violent voice once more tore across the heavens. "Kill." The sound wave ground with a murderous intent so dense it felt like gravel on skin. The iron armor beast instantly went berserk. Its long tail whipped out with a muffled sonic crack, air blasting apart. Several struggling cultivators were caught across the waist. Their protective, spiritual auras crumbled like paper, bodies exploding into clouds of bloody mist before a scream could even form. Fierce wind clawed at Kael's back. His scalp went numb. Spiritual energy churned madly through him, his feet exploding with force as he hurled himself forward over Ten Zhang. When he landed, he clearly felt the back of his robes tear into several gashes from the aftershock. The fatty's luck was far worse. A bizarre cry tore from his lips as he was caught square. His entire body smashed like a cannonball into the earth ahead, blasting out a deep crater. Kael skimmed right past the rim. Behind him, a pudgy hand abruptly thrust out of the dust, pressed against the ground, and that ball-like figure shot back up, sticking close once more. His face was pale, but his eyes blazed frighteningly bright. "Pa, want Peng Yi's life? Dream on." Their gazes clashed mid-flight. In an instant, both read the same cold calculation. Whoever fell behind became the iron armor beast's living target. Kael gritted his teeth, spurring his spiritual energy without regard for cost. The swelling ache in his meridians spiked violently, as if red. Hot iron wires slithered through his acupoints. Light and shadow warped before his eyes. The colossal trees on either side blurred into continuous dark, green afterimages shooting backward. Wind howled into his ears like a keening shriek. His speed wrenched itself up another notch, leaving the fatty behind again. The fatty's plump face flushed crimson, near bursting. A muffled grunt escaped his throat, and an unignorable surge of power erupted from his whole body. His speed skyrocketed, pulling him back into the lead. The two silhouettes alternated in mad frenzy through the dense forest. Tree shadows stretched into flowing green light, rotted leaves underfoot, exploding outward, then collapsing. Ward, true fire stoked between them. In their eyes, nothing remained but each other's speed. The iron armor beast's receding roars faded into a dim backdrop. The world in front of them abruptly burst open. The boundless, tangled forest fell away, and a vast plain surged toward them. In the farthest distance, the towering walled outline of Great Kai Imperial City sprawled on the horizon like a slumbering primordial beast. Wait. The fatty's voice cracked, each word scraped from his throat. Pang, ye can't take it any more. Let Pang ye rest a moment." Kael's eyes were bloodshot, a hoarse sound clawed from his throat. "Admit defeat, then. Competing with me in speed, you're still a step short." Both bodies jolted to a simultaneous, violent halt. They collapsed to the ground in a sitting heap, spines jarring with sharp pain from the impact, yet neither had strength to shift a finger. Kael's lungs blazed as if seared by fire, each inhale carrying the scalding taste of blood. His heart hammered crazily against his ribcage, pounding his vision into streaks of black. The muscles in his legs jumped and twitched, a numbing soreness drowning every sinew like a tide, waves of residual pain still radiating through his meridians. Folly slid off his back, her small face frantic. She saw only Kael's pale lips moving silently, wordlessly. It was not that he did not want to run. He simply could not run a single step more. Kael forced his trembling hand into his robes and pulled out the healing elixir Dr. Zhu had given him. He placed one in Folly's mouth and swallowed another himself. The medicinal strength melted through him, finally birthing a thread of warmth in his meridians. Not far away, the fatty's trembling hand fished out a pitch-black pill and threw it into his mouth. He exhaled a long breath of turbid air, wiped the grass debris from the corner of his mouth, hostility still plain in his eyes. His voice dripped with scorn. "If Pang Yi hadn't gotten his Kai tangled back there, you wouldn't even be fit to eat the dust behind my backside." Kael slowly stood, Folly on his back. Spiritual energy coiled around his fingertips into faint sword intent. His tone was ice. "Carrying a person, and you still couldn't outrun me. You've got a lot of nerve running your mouth." Their gazes locked, sparks practically crackling in the air between them. The fatty's eyes narrowed. "This brother here, I see you're still not convinced." "Right back at you, you, fellow, are also extremely punchable." No sooner had the words fallen than the true Kai left in their bodies flared in a powerful surge, as if they would clash again right on the wreckage. But the earth under their feet answered first. A great tremor boomed from far away, as if some ancient beast slumbering beneath the earth had rolled over. Sand and stones danced and bounced, Fisher's spider whipping out from under their feet. In the next instant, demonic roars tore a gash across the sky. One by one, shade after shade ripped through the tree line at the edge of sight, silhouettes menacing. Their reeking, bloody wind flooded into every nostril. Kael's face underwent a drastic change. He said not a single word. He hoisted Folly back onto his back, and his body already shot like a loosed arrow toward that 100-jang blue-gray colossal city on the horizon. The fatty almost started at the same instant, but his mouth still would not yield. Lame cripple, what are you running for? What business is it of yours that Pang Yi heads to the imperial capital? Get lost far away. For a few hundred lie around, that's the only place with a barrier. Are you stupid or what? Under their feet, dust flew, and they streaked toward Great Kai Imperial City at a speed that near tore the air apart. In moments, the city walls lunged into view. The 100-jang blue-gray fortifications stood tall and imposing, jang, long bricks carved dense with talisman script. Every inscription, powered by origin crystal, leaked a milky, white halo, like a layer of flowing moonlight plated onto the walls. A low, thrumming energy hum saturated the air. The transparent defensive barrier flickered into half, visible existence 3 jang ahead, an extremely faint ripple passing over it now and then. Beneath the walls, several hundred figures clustered into a tide of despair. Rogue cultivators, merchants, students rushing to Valor Hall, all of them tilted their heads back, staring at that several jang-high exotic, metal, cast city gate. It was sealed tight, an iron pronouncement of death. The roars behind them closed another several li of distance. The grit on the ground no longer just danced, it surged like boiling water. Those with sharp eyes could now make out the eerie, gleaming demonic pupils within those vast shadows, and the green smoke rising from corrosive drool dripping to the earth. A round, rotund figure sprinted at the very front, none other than that fatty. He glanced back at Kael, who had fallen behind, and a smug look just bloomed on his face. His mouth opened. Pang Yi heads in furs. Before he could finish, his entire body slammed into an invisible mountain. A muffled, tooth-jarring thud erupted. The transparent barrier shuddered violently, sending a visible ring of force rippling outward. The fatty's form compressed for an instant, then rebounded like a ball, tracing a wretched arc through the air before crashing to the ground 100 meters away. Dust geysered knee-high, those behind him never managed to scream, bones snapped, limbs twisted, and they sprawled motionless in pools of blood. The fatty scrambled up, clutching the swollen lump on his forehead, and roared curses. "Bastards, you trying to get Pang Yi killed." The roaring surged within a mile. The stench of the stampeding beasts solidified into a foul gale that whipped hair and robes into chaos. The crowd collapsed into utter pandemonium. Desperate pleas rose in a torrent. "Please, open the gates. I'm with the Hengyuan Commerce Guild. My father runs Wuding City. My uncle is an instructor at Valor Hall. Let me in." "Open up. Hurry, open up." Wails, shrieks, and threats merged into a cacophonous torrent. Yet the gate of strange metal and the milky white barrier remained utterly still, its flowing runes casting a cold, indifferent sheen across pallid faces. High above the city walls, among the clouds, 3 figures stood motionless in the void, their gazes pierced past the chaos below, fixed coldly on the depths of the wildwood. The white-haired elder's long brows knitted tightly. The wildwood has been calm for decades. Now a single man throws it into this madness. What is he? Could he be a transformed beast? Master Feng shook his head, his voice heavy with unease. A beast's transformation wouldn't cause such panic. Those creatures react with terror, not submission. It defies logic. Commander Zhu stood at the center. Heavy armor radiated a bone-chilling frost. His voice cut the air, utterly unwavering. "It doesn't matter what he is. Capture the source, and the beast tide resolves itself. Are we agreed?" The elder nodded, tone brittle as old bone. "There's no time to waste." Master Feng's brow creased, hesitation flickering in his gaze. If all these people below die outside the walls, it might. Commander Zhu's tone fell flat as a blade. "Then they die. My duty is to keep the imperial capital intact. The rest is none of my concern." Master Feng's face twisted. "You," the elder hastily interposed himself, a placating hand raised. "Master Feng, Commander Zhu has his duty. Still many down there have ties to the great houses within the city. If not a single one remains, it won't reflect well on the commander either." Commander Zhu paused a single beat. Then indifference settled on his features. "Open a breach. Live or die, it's their own fate." Below, the ground thundered, a war drum's relentless cadence. From every horizon, the beast shade surged like a dark tide. Auras blazed at the 4th tier and above. Colossal forms radiated 6th tier pressure. Each footfall sent the wall's talisman arrays into frantic, stuttering pulses of light. Against the barrier, a pudgy figure sagged, face bloodless. A quavered voice bled from him. It's over, Pang. You came to face a human tribulation. Getting eaten by beasts isn't any kind of tribulation at all." Folly clutched Kael's shoulder. Her small face white as bleached bone. Young Master Kael said nothing. His knuckles cracked as his grip tightened on the sword hilt. Spiritual power surged through his meridians, a flood seeking an outlet. The prime arrival, sword Kai hummed within the scabbard, a caged beast demanding release. He stared at the barrier, heat blazing from his eyes. He would not die here. He would not. A shrieking cry, near voice, breaking, tore through the chaos. Look, a breach, 1,000 meters distant, the milky defensive curtain, dense as congealed essence, split apart. A narrow slit expanded, barely wider than a pair of shoulders. The air trembled, a low resonant hum. White, gold radiance flowed aside, like molten light. The opening flickered with a cold, piercing gleam. In that instant, every soul went feral. A man's scream tore through. Charge, another bellowed, shoving bodies, move. Get out of my way. Hundreds erupted in a primal surge. A human torrent crushed against the narrow opening. Bodies stumbled and fell, trampled. Elbows shattered cheekbones, muffled groans drowned under stampeding feet. Fatty scuttled closest. He dove head first into the portal, his round form swallowed by the light. Glancing back, he saw Kael still 100 meters distant, sprinting for his life. Fatty patted his chest, trembling. Good, good, Pangyi's luck holds. Boom, boom, the beasts rammed the barrier, faster, harder. The walls shuddered violently, runes bursting in showers of sparks. Screams tore from those two slow trampled, ripped apart by demonic winds. The stench of blood shot heavenward. Kael's spiritual senses screamed to their limit. Bursts of cyclonic spiritual energy detonated beneath his soles. He darted through the stampede, a fish through churning waters, weaving past beasts and maddened crowds. On his back, folly clung to his neck, wind shrieking past their ears. Ahead, a young man with wild eyes hacked a path, blade flashing. Hot blood splattered his robes. His voice cracked with arrogance. My father is the lord of Wooding City. My uncle teaches at Valor Hall. My life is worth more than yours. Get the hell out of my way. He hacked down the last obstacle and landed at the portal's edge, facing Kael, who arrived in the same instant. The narrow slit allowed only one. Both halted, dust swirling at their feet. Kael's gaze held the cold of tempered ice. Shielding Folly behind him, his sheathed sword screamed sword intent, so sharp it seemed to press against the youth's throat. The young man stood drenched, madness flickering in his pupils, sword hand trembling, tip leveled at Kael's face. The chaos dimmed, the narrow gap sucked air dry. Two pairs of eyes locked, homicidal intent crackling between them. The young man's voice cracked into a feral shriek. Scram, I'm going first. Madness consumed him. Third, stage aperture opening power, erupted without restraint. His blade tore through the air, aimed at Kael's throat. Barely a meter separated them. The icy gleam licked the nape of Folly's neck. One more inch, and she would die. A savage fire lit Kael's eyes. The words came as a death sentence, courting death. The spiritual power he'd been stockpiling detonated through his meridians, flooding the blade. The sword sang. A crisp horizontal slash, no flourishes. Just murderous economy. Clang, a crystalline ring pierced the pandemonium. The young man's blade snapped in two. The severed half spiraled skyward, reflecting the barrier's glow in a cold arc. Prime arrival's sword Kai burst forth, condensing into a near-invisible pulse. It punched into his chest with a muffled thump. Time stretched raw. The sword Kai pierced through. His robe bulged at the back as a jet of blood sprayed. Then the wound detonated blood mist erupted from chest and spine alike. Only then did the broken blade complete its spin, tip down, stabbing the earth with a metallic shing, blood flicking from the fuller. Zed! He toppled backward, silent, a ring of dust rising. But that single heartbeat's delay had sealed their doom. A colossal tail swept in, dozens of feet long. Pitch-black scales sheathed it, each palm, sized and razor-edged. The air compressed ahead into visible ripples, shrieking like a banshee. The screech of grinding scales clawed at the ears, 1,000 files on iron. Those in its path were pulped before a scream could form. Severed limbs, blood mist, twin furrows carved through flesh and air. In a blink, that black wall of a tail loomed before Kael, barely 3 feet from his face. Folly's pupils constricted to pinpricks, faint arcane patterns flickering in her gaze. Her voice was a shriek. Young master, Kael didn't think, his voice cut like a whip. Get inside first. His left hand clamped onto her shoulder, fingers biting through cloth to flesh. He twisted, core strength blazing up through his arm. Spiritual energy blasted from his palm. Folly flew, body a straight line through the sky, robes snapping. Her stare remained locked on Kael, terror seared into her eyes, lips moving in a silent prayer. The tail was bare feet away now. Wind pressure slammed his face, whipping hair backward, raising a stinging rash of agony. Inside the barrier, Fatty clicked his tongue, a smirk plastered across his face. Harsh luck, then. Clang, a metallic shriek tore the air. At the last fraction of a breath, Kael swept his blade sideways, flat meeting the tail head on. Sparks burst in a waterfall. A visible shockwave rippled out, flinging stones, a wet tearing sound, the skin between thumb and forefinger split, flesh bared. Before blood could run, the vibration atomized it into a crimson mist drifting down the hilt. PFFT, blood sprayed from his lips. His organs clenched as if a giant hand wrung them. Bones rattled with brittle cracks, countless fractures. It was less pain than the crushing pressure of being ground to dust. But the force blasted him like a cannonball. His body tore through the air, a howling blur of wind and blood, and slammed into the barrier. Fatty's smirk froze. He started, voice trailing off. Dude's got some serious luck to still be. Then his face went stark white. No *T. Before the curse finished, Kael's body slammed into him. A dull thud, 2 crisp cracks of bone dislocating. They tumbled backward and crashed into the city wall, a muffled bang. The grey-green stone cratered, dust and fragments rained down. Beyond the barrier, beasts roared, shaking the heavens. Their ramming grew violent. Boom, boom, boom. Ripples churned across the barrier's surface. The wall quivered, unstable. From atop the wall, the commandant's voice barked. Quick, seal that breach. Wooong, the breach snapped shut. Light flared, then settled. The barrier stabilized completely. No charge could make it tremble now. Outside the city, the world plunged into a living hell. Shrieks of despair rose from the souls left outside. Ghostly wails pierced the air. A sky-darkening volley of crossbow bolts followed. Each shaft several feet long, blazed with flowing runes. They crashed into the beast horde like a storm. Enraged, the monsters wheeled on the stragglers, flesh ripped. Agonized wails echoed, bones crunched grotesquely, all melded into a nightmare chorus. Blood painted the ground crimson. It began to coat the barrier, a faint sanguine film spreading over the translucent dome. 2 thuds echoed inside the barrier. Kael and Fatty slammed onto the ground. Neither moved for a long, still moment. A wild cry shattered the silence. Folly stormed toward Kael, her eyes blazing with desperation. Young master. Cough, cough. Kael choked out another mouthful of blood. He forced himself upright, his face pale as paper. His voice was a ragged breath. It's nothing. Won't even kill me. She was a flurry of motion, fumbling for every healing elixir Dr. Zhu had given them. She shoved them toward his mouth. The pills now. He had to block her hand, his expression weary. I don't need that many. My injuries. Honestly, they aren't that serious. A chill coursed through him as he glanced at the green wall. One direct hit, and he'd be dead or half dead. His gaze shifted to Fatty, still gasping and sprawled beside him. Quiet relief settled over him. At least he'd had a human cushion. Folly was still trembling. She threw her arms around him, her wiry embrace locking tight around his waist. Her voice broke. Young master. An aggrieved huff came from the sidelines. Fatty's voice was thick with fury. You did that on purpose, didn't you? Kael glanced at him, a hint of a smirk on his lips. Oh, thanks for that. The gratitude was as empty as a hollow cave, the tone offhanded, careless. Fatty scrambled upright. He smeared blood from his lip, his glare hot enough to scorch. What's that supposed to mean? Means thank you. You bastard, trying to screw me, Pang Yi. Then, no thanks. Fatty's bulk quivered with rage. He thrust out a plump hand. Hand him over. Pang Yi here got hurt too. Folly shot him a glare. No, she stuffed the pills back inside her clothes fast as a squirrel. Fatty was beside himself. He pointed a trembling finger at her. Girl, open your eyes and look. I got hurt saving him. How can you be so ungrateful? You won't even toss me one pill. Miserly, absolutely miserly. Folly didn't budge. No, you were laughing at young master just now. I saw you. Fatty felt like crying. The long sealed city gates groaned open. A collective sigh rippled through the crowd. Kael rose to his feet. He brushed dust from his robes, his voice casual. Well, Fatty, we'll part ways for now. He tugged Folly into the human current streaming through the gate, not waiting for a reply. Fatty's face fell, then it twisted into a snarl. Part my ass. Pang Yi hasn't been played like a fool since he was a kid. Just you wait, I'll settle this score one day. Beyond the walls, the world was a panorama of gore. Beside the body of the young man, Kael had counter. Killed stood a middle-aged man. He bent low and retrieved a broken half of a sword. Still, wet blood streaked its steel. His gaze fell on the gaping hole, punched through the youth's chest. Fury drew inward in his eyes, condensing to a needle. Point of icy chill. Veins bulged around his lids. His knuckles whitened on the broken blade. Nails dug pale grooves almost into the metal. Killing intent coalesced into palpable weight. The temperature plunged. A thin rime of frost crept across the congealing blood pools. His voice ground from between his teeth, guttural as a beast's growl. Who dares kill my nephew? A month on the road since leaving Skyblade City. An escape from the beast tide that nearly cost them their lives. Even a body forged of iron couldn't stave off this exhaustion. 7 days remained until the opening of Valor Hall. Kael lifted his eyes. The streets teemed with people. He glanced at Folly beside him, pale but still forcing herself upright. He took her hand, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. Let's find a room first. The door hadn't fully opened before the innkeeper scurried over. His hands were clasped in frantic apology. A helpless, regretful smile plastered his face. Good sir, I am truly, terribly sorry. 9 inns in a row, 9 great gates, 9 identical smiling faces. 9 refusals, each word echoing the last. The beast tide rages. Rogue cultivators flood the imperial capital like startled birds. Every crack in every brick of this outer city is crammed with people. Kael stands in the middle of the street. The autumn wind snaps the hem of his robes. Folly's tiny hand clutches his sleeve. Her voice thins to a mosquito whine. Young master, are we going to sleep on the street? Kael does not answer. He weighs whether to knock on the 7th prince's door directly. Then an old man, squatting in the sun against a wall, lifts his eyelids. He takes a drag from his dry pipe. His voice emerges in a lazy drawl. Little brother, head for the inner city. The houses there are pricey. Rogue cultivators can't afford them. Bound to be vacancies, Kael mutters his thanks, asks for directions, and turns to leave. The instant his figure disappears into the alley mouth, a bone-splitting crack rips from the street corner. A shoulder blade crushed to splinters. The scream cuts off like a slaughtered fowl. A voice drips venom. Who killed my nephew? Speak. Another voice, broken. A youth with a little girl. Kael's stride never falters. He only tilts his head a fraction in the cross. Draft, then strides away. He crosses the dividing line where gray cobblestone turns to warm jade. The spiritual energy concentration surges in the air. Jade tiles beneath his feet gleam sleek as suet. They mirror the pale gold talisman light flowing across the upturned eaves. With every step, a whisper of spiritual resonance spills from the mortared seams. It coils around his ankle, then dissipates into nothing. Folly's eyes widen. Even her exhaustion seems to fade. Kael spares no glance for the shopfronts carved with dragons and phoenixes. He walks directly toward the tallest, most ostentatious building, the Murong Inn. The main doors stand 3 zhang high. They swing open. A dense sandalwood fragrance crashes over him, laced with the faint glow of a spirit, gathering array. Suspended motes of spiritual dust flicker like stardust with each breath. A pulse marks the array's heartbeat. Across the floor, the beams, even the corners of the counter, visible ripples of spiritual energy roll out in concentric rings. The entire hall soaks in the aura of a blessed grotto, heaven. A manager leans against the counter. He picks at his nails. His eyes sweep over the newcomers. From Kael's dusty hem to Folly's anxious face, he frowns, returning to his cuticles. Folly's voice cuts through, clear as a bell. We need a room. The manager ekes out a single word, yes. One left, the premium suite heaven. Grade, he lifts his eyelids. The corners of his mouth curl in undisguised contempt. Spirit, gathering array at 5-fold amplification. 1,000 origin crystals a day, staying or not staying. Kael's expression is still as deep water. Before he can speak, a commotion drifts in from outside. Footsteps and obsequious chatter. Junior Sister Liu, the heaven, grade suite here is unique in the imperial capital. Combined with the spirit source you carry, you'll stabilize your realm before the courtyard opens. Before the voice finishes, a cold fragrance arrives first. Faint as winter plum blossoms blooming in snow, yet it stirs an itch deep in the heart. Ione steps in, dressed in plain robes. Her features are cold and pristine as frost. The spiritual dust parts around her, enhancing her ethereal aura. Beside her, Nero Lee, its eyes glued to the slope of her cheek. His Adam's apple bobs. His breathing unconsciously shallows. He seems to want to inhale that icy fragrance straight into his lungs. She nods, her voice a crystalline clash of ice on jade. I am in your debt, brother. Nero Lee, its bones seem to turn to jelly. He babbles his pleasure. The manager rockets upright. The wrinkles on his face bunch into a chrysanthemum bloom. His waist bends so low his head nearly kisses his knees. Young Master Liu, what brings you here today? Nero Lee utters a casual sound of acknowledgement, his gaze still pinned on Ione, the heaven, grade suite. Still available, the manager's voice is a fervent hiss. Of course. We keep it reserved especially for you, young master. Good. My junior sister Liu will be staying here for a short while. As he speaks, he sweeps his gaze over Kael, standing in the hall. A single glance, then he looks away. Indifferent, a country bumpkin from some backwater place not worth wasting his eyes on, Ione recognizes the person opposite her. She freezes for an instant. Her expression cools at a visible rate, like a thin layer of ice crystallizing over clear water. Revulsion churns in Kael's gut. The manager turns around, facing Kael. The chrysanthemum on his face wilts into dead twigs. The guest room is no longer. Kael's voice cuts in. Not loud, but each word hammers down like an iron nail, driven into the floorboards. I booked this room first. The manager's smile was a thin, bloodless thing. His voice came out dry and cutting. Where are the origin crystals? Without payment, this room belongs to no one. I can give it to whomever I please. Folly's face flared crimson, her hands balling into fists. She spat the words, a strangled cry. We were clearly here first. Nerolea tilted his head, eyeing Kael sidelong. He leaned closer to Ione, his voice carrying a deliberate, public edge. Junior sister Liu, it seems this fellow townsman of yours doesn't understand the rules. Ione's face remained a porcelain mask. Her tone was utterly flat. He's always been like this, always reaching beyond his means just to draw attention. A gleam kindled in Nerolea's eyes, quick and predatory. I see. With your beauty, junior sister, admirers naturally swarm like carps in a river. This boy, he jutted his chin at Kael, must be another toad lusting after swan meat. He grew more animated, pacing half a step, hands clasped behind his back. His disdain dripped like ink. But a man must know his own limits. Before you try to steal the spotlight, weigh your own worth, and look at whose land you're standing on. The great Kai Imperial City isn't some rundown backwater like Skyblade City that any beggar can cling to. He stole another glance at Ione. Her blank expression emboldened him. He rounded on Kael, a cruel hook tugging at the corner of his mouth. Today, for junior sister's sake, I'll overlook your insolence. You have 3 breaths to crawl out of my sight, otherwise. He paused. The smile never wavered, but venom seeped into his eyes. The spirit, gathering array, felt it. The spiritual dust hung suspended, frozen. A bone-piercing chill bled into the air from nowhere. The consequences of my displeasure, few in this imperial capital can afford to bear them. Kael drew a deep breath. His hand had slipped into his dimensional pouch, fingers brushing the cool jade of the token of Murong Yan, a gift from Yana Murong. But Ione's cold words struck his ears, and his grip loosened. Some paths, after all, must be carved by one's own sword. He released the token. His chest heaved, deep in his dantian, a dense surge of martial essence detonated, roaring through his meridians. Muffled cracks rippled through his bones, audible only to him. He raised his eyes. The light in them was heavy and sharp, a blade fresh from the tempering fire. It drove straight into Nerolea's arrogant face. With each breath, the spiritual energy in the hall churned into disarray. Through the sandalwood aroma, a sharp edge crackled, the stillness before a mountain storm. The atmosphere froze solid. Nerolea's gaze bored into Kael like a poison. Dipped dagger, the onlookers had fallen silent, their breathing hushed to nothing. His voice dripped with twisted, long-suppressed pleasure. Kneel, kowtow and beg junior sister Liu for forgiveness. Otherwise, you won't leave Imperial Capital alive today. Ione stood to the side, her fingertips dug into her palms, and a feverish anticipation burned deep in her eyes. Kael lowered his gaze, his left hand pressed gently on Folly's trembling shoulder. His right turned over, drawing from his dimensional pouch a long sword riddled with notches. The weapon hummed faintly, scrap iron in his grip, yet a streak of frigid light slithered from hilt to tip, then erupted. Prime Arrival Sword Kai condensed into a visible vortex of distortion. The candle flames bowed in unison. In the stuttering chiaroscuro, the sword's point aimed directly at Nerolea's throat. Kael's voice dropped, low and cutting like split stone and shorn metal. I told you once, my bones are hard, my knees don't bend. If you want me to kneel, then trade it with your life. The sword light flared. Nerolea's pupils shrank to pinpricks. The approaching point of cold starlight washed his face chalk white. He wanted to retreat, but his legs were rigid, pillars poured full of lead, a distorted gasp squeezed from his throat. Death's chill kissed his neck. He could smell the raw, metallic tang of sword, wind tearing the air. A deep shout exploded like muffled thunder. Insolence. Steward Song's figure had already planted itself sideways in front of Neroleat. He wasted no words. Spirit energy churned within him like a furious river. His right fist blasted out the air, concussed with a boom. Shockwaves from the splitting floor radiated outward. The force of mountain-shaking art transformed into a millstone, heavy astral strike, crashing directly into Kael's sword momentum. At the epicenter, a visible ring of air, shock erupted. Tables and chairs were ripped from their moorings, hurled aside. The shriek of shattering cups and dishes clawed at the ears. Wood splinters swirled, the entire inn's main hall shuddered violently, as if shaken by an enormous invisible hand. The moment Kael's sword intent cleaved through the fist force, a fierce pain tore through the web of his hand. Old wounds split open, true Kai raged backward through his meridians. His soul scraped the ground as he shot backward, sparks bursting in stabbing points, a coppery sweetness surged up his throat. He could not suppress it, a thread of bright red trickled from the corner of his lips. Folly lunged forward, desperately bracing him. Young master. Steward Song stood with hands clasped behind him. A flicker of surprise crossed his eyes, then drowned in deeper gloom. He stepped over the shattered wood, his voice cold as scraping iron, each word landing like a hammer on stone. You truly have a death wish. Who gave you the right to run rampant on the Murong family's turf?